Welcome back. So this is the recap for our second session of Blood, Bone, and Shadow. When we last left off, the party was at the cottage of the madman Airgor near the village of Melwyn. The madman had been raving about the Crow Prince and the crows watching him and coming to kill everybody this winter. So, Arthmael the Demorthen decides to redo the wards and the runes of protection that cover the cabin, right, to put the madman at ease. So he starts doing that during the day. Lachlan the Bard decides to be on the lookout for the fields. The hut is next to the fields, where they have planted wheat and crops. And so he sits down to look out all day and just see what he can see. Cormac the Knight decides to go back to Castle MacLear and report, on his, he's arrived to see if there's any duties or anything pending for him. As it happens, there is, nothing there. He is told again, that Vector Yaber from the Temple of the One God is here, and he's in need of an escort. But Cormac is not given any clear, specific instruction. So he decides to, after he has seen to his horse and his gear and everything, he decides to head back to the hut and see what has transpired. So during the day, the Demorthen has finished his carvings, and the Bard has seen nothing in the fields. A couple of crows, but nothing out of the ordinary, right? It's harvest time, there's crows, but nothing that seems unnatural. So the Bard continues to be interested in this. So he decides to stay the night outside the cottage and see what happens. The Demorthen decides to go back to the inn and sleep, get a good night's sleep. Cormac decides to stay with his friend Lachlan and keep watch. So Lachlan climbs a tree and, settles down on one of the branches to wait, while Cormac just sits at the base of the tree and promptly falls asleep. So I had them do, checks to stay awake. Cormac said, "Don't even bother. I fall asleep. I don't want to stay up all night." So he does, and Lachlan makes his check and stays up all night. And eventually, around very late in the evening, by the light of the moon, he sees a bunch of crows land on tree branches near the hut and just fly down at night and sit there and look at the cottage. The hermit has been keeping a light on at night. He doesn't sleep in the dark. He just keeps a fire burning in the fireplace, so they can see the glow from beneath the door and through the cracks in the wood planks and windows and whatnot. But they don't see the hermit directly, right? So they're outside. So Lachlan watches the crows alight, which is completely abnormal because the crows are not supposed to be out at night. So he takes off his shoe and drops it on Cormac's head to wake him up. Cormac wakes up. Lachlan makes a stealth check to come down from the tree without making any noise. He succeeds and approaches the other tree where the crows are at, but doesn't actually do anything but stare at them and try to find out what they are trying to do. Cormac has his weapons ready, but is also not moving, staying behind the tree so as not to make any noise. And so they wait, and suddenly they hear this crashing sound coming from inside the cabin, and the crows fly off. So when the crows fly off, they rush to the cabin's side. They open the door, and they find that Airgor the hermit has taken his own life. He's hung himself from the rafters of the cottage. So they stay there. They debate on whether to go get the Demorphin right now. They figure, it can wait, but they won't take the body down. They leave him as the body is, so that the Demorphin can investigate when he comes over to see. But they don't want to leave the body alone, so they close the door to the cottage, and Cormac sits with his back to the door, and Lachlan also waits, keeps vigil, right, until dawn. The thing is, by this time, Cormac says again, I put my back against the door and I go to sleep again. I don't care. And Lachlan says to, it's like he's dead already. You might as well just go to sleep again. So they both fall asleep and they share the same dream. It's this nightmare of this dark tree in a cold place, and it's this darkened tree full of crows, and the crows look at them with glowing red eyes, and they have the sense of foreboding and that something is really wrong, and a sense of overwhelming evil, and eventually they wake up, and as they talk, they discover that they've shared this vision at night. So immediately, that makes them even more nervous. So they go outside and they find the Demorphin and bring him back to explore, to investigate the body. They wind up taking the body down, and the Demorphin, speaks words over the deceased body. And by this time, I, as the GM, have forgotten completely. My thought was, okay, I'll throw a bang in there, and the bang is that the hermit kills himself. And I completely forgot that the druids, the Demorphin's single magical power is to speak with dead. But it works out great, because then the Demorphin performs this gruesome ceremony where, after blessing the body, he basically carves it open and removes a section of the rib. And he uses that to begin his spell. Now, the way we work this out, this is not a spell that it's in the Blood and Bone rule book. So what we decided is that I would set a difficulty for the questions, and he has to make his check at the cost of one point of power, right? There's this currency here, so he can keep asking questions as long as he pays the power. And what I decided is that the difficulty rating is going to escalate. The longer the time has passed between the deceased person's death until the questions are asked, the harder they're going to be. And also, the more subsequent questions you ask, the greater the difficulty grows, right? So if you ask 5 questions, well, they escalate, right? So I think I set the original difficulty at 10, and then I escalated each subsequent question 15, 20, 25. So, eventually he started missing those checks. And they're yes or no questions. And so I discussed with Todd, Arthmael's player, how are we going to deliver these answers? And he said short visions. So basically, if he succeeds, he gets the answer to a yes or no question. If he fails, then he gets a vague answer. It's neither yes nor no. It's possibly unrelated vision. So, he asks, what does he ask? He asks, the other guys told him of the vision of the tree. So he asks, Arthmael asks Ergor's body whether he saw the tree as well. And so in return, he succeeds, and he is granted a vision of the same dark tree in a cold place, and visions of mountains and snow-covered mountains. And he sees the tree covered in crows. So that is a yes. He asks another question. I can't remember what it was. And then he asks, did the Crow Prince murder you? And or is the Crow Prince responsible for your death? And so he succeeds in the check again, and he gets this vision of what seems to be like a whirlwind of crows, just massive murders of crows just flocking around in a like a whirlwind, and then he goes through and enters the eye of the storm, and he sees this mass of writhing feathers and beaks, and it's a bunch of crows, and together they form this humanoid silhouette with the head of a crow that looks at him and screams at him as the mass explodes into a rain of crows basically flying at him. So with this vision, it is, he takes as a yes, the Prince of Crows is responsible for the hermit's death. And that's about it. I think he tries another question and fails, so he just gets vague visions of cold, snow-capped mountains. And that's all the information he really gets. Following this, they decide to bury the body. As the Morthin, it falls to Arthmael to take care of the ceremony, so he summons, the principals, the local Ansailier or clan chief of the MacLear, and she visits and presides over the ceremony as well. They bless the body, they say goodbye, they bury the body. By this time, Arthmael has decided to check out the situation in the Loch Varn region. Again, just for reference, we're here at the village of Melwyn. And among the many rumors that the party heard is that Loch Varn, the harvest is failing. There seems to be problems with the harvest, and this being near the time for the blessing of the crops anyway, Arthmael the Demorthin decides that this is his top priority, that they must go to Loch Varn now. So Cormac once more goes to the castle, to Castle MacLear, to clear it with his lord, with Lord Bryn, to tell him where he's going. By this session, the guys had asked regarding, the map, and by this point what I did is I had this original map that I drew of the Northern Vale, and it's basically what you're seeing on the screen. It's just a photograph that I worked in Photoshop. But the guys said, that's too little. We need more terrain. So I wound up getting a second poster board and just filling a whole portion of the Southern Vale. But, instead of drowning them in even more rumors, I decided, they've had enough. Let's see what they do with the rumors that they have heard before we start venturing south. So, but still, that's what they had. So Cormac decides to escort the Victor Yaber, and his Blade Knight Irvin to the Chapel of St. Nylene, which is right here. So as you can see, their planned route is to go across the bridge, go up into the mountains, pass through this area, which is the path where all the three roads meet, and then head to St. Nylene's, and then eventually down to Loch Varn. Right, so as they're getting ready to leave, Cormac also meets Ildian, the Varigal, who tells him that she is headed west to deliver packages to Tolg Naom, the capital of the area, which is beyond the map. It's west of Kells, so she's headed in that direction. But again, she reminds them that when she crossed the mountains near the pass, she met some merchants, and they haven't arrived. And she's getting worried because it's been a while, and she knows that oxen pulling carts, which are laden with metal goods from the smith up in Fariel, from the smith Fank. It's heavy, and oxen move slowly, so she understands that they may be delayed. They were also carrying casks of wine from the Northern Vale region. So, she's a little bit worried and asks Cormac to be on the lookout. Now, Cormac asks the local knights, what's going on up north. And so he hears tale of a band of bandits called the Black Feathers, who are active in the Northern Vale region. But according to the Lord of Fortress Smearale, which is a subordinate, it's this castle right here, next to the village of Ferrell. This is one of the Alaran invaders. He's subordinate to Lord Bryn, who rules from Castle Maclear here in Melwyn. According to Lord Argan of the fortress, this bandit gang they're not much trouble, right? They don't leave the Derg Valley. It's a few bandits. They got the situation under control. So, everything seems to be going well. So after they make preparations, they meet up with Vector Yaber and set off. The journey takes a couple of days, so, they rest up halfway, and again, when they go up the mountains, it's a climb, so it takes them a while. They've seen no sign of the merchants, and they decide to spend the night in this fortress. The valley, they don't have enough money to operate all of these watchtowers. They've only a handful of knights here in Castle Maclear, another handful in Smearale, and a handful further down south. So, this war of conquest has been, 40, 50, 60 years in the past. So, they don't have a huge presence here. There are still rebel clans in the southern part of the Melwyn Vale, but they don't operate these strongholds. So the first, called Naird's stronghold, is locked, but the courtyard is left open for travelers to spend the night. And so when our party comes into the courtyard, the tower's locked, but the courtyard is open, so they open up the gates, and they find a bunch of murdered people with black feathered arrows riddling the corpses, and it's the merchants that Ildian met. They are 4 merchants slain on the ground with 2 guards stripped of armor, and there are no carts. So coming up on this trail, so far they had seen no tracks to indicate that the merchants had gotten past this point. Cormac does a quick scouting around and figures out that yes, they did come in here with carts, and the carts left again, but the only tracks head up north back toward the pass in the mountains, right? So that's the only indication. So this, immediately lets Cormac realize that, maybe the threat of these black feather bandits isn't as contained as Lord Argan of Derg seems to think they are, because they have indeed, gotten out of the valley. True, the northern valley of Derg is this region up north. It basically covers all this area is considered Derg itself, right? But this is like just outside the pass. So, that's a warning that maybe things are not as under control as they used to be. So at this point, it comes to Arthmael, and he says, we'll bury the bodies, but I have questions to ask. And so by this time, it's a session end, so we decide to call it a night, while Todd, as Arthmael, takes the week off to think of questions to ask these bodies. So, from the GM's perspective, I think I said basically all I had to. It was basically a question of having the bang of the hermit killing himself, but then we got the nice surprise of the Demorthan's power to speak with dead. So that was an interesting twist. We got some nice visions out of that. and the rest was planning the journey and taking off. And with the second bang that I had already planned from session 1 was having those merchants killed, right? So that is something for them to explore, and as we'll see in the next recap, they did. They had a nice conversation with all these dead bodies. So we'll have to wait for next session for that. So thanks for watching, and hope you liked it.